innovator extraordinaire. And according to your bio, some of your many different types of inventions are making their way into everyday systems that we might encounter. So looking forward to your talk. Everyone, this is Jonathan Josephson from Quantum Interface.
It's going to take a minute to boot up. Thank you for staying. How many of you are from Austin? Let's see. Wow, that's good. Homers. How many from Texas? How many from Southern California? Okay, so all three of us should know what this symbol means, right? Okay. That's a gesture, by the way. That's important because we're going to compare it with the other things we're going to go over today. Thank you for being here again. Thank you, Mark, for putting this on. This is pretty amazing. We've been working at this for 12 years now in the trenches, and our IP dates back to 2000. It's for the use of motion for selection and attribute control. And really today what we're going to talk about is something I know you haven't heard because I've been here, and that is the true difference between gestures and motion. Motion is the living, natural interface that's really being left out of what we've got. Of our interfaces today. Almost everything we're talking about says gestures. I'm the CTO and the IP founder of Quantum Interface. We're a Texas corporation. Like I said, we have been in the trenches here for about 12 years, and the industry itself, the hardware, the sensor technology is finally allowing us to do what our dream has been for over a decade. I remember in 2000, when I first started approaching investors, I would say, motion's the way to go, and they'd say, why? I don't see it anywhere. That was when Y2K was there. So if you all remember Y2K and the worry about computers going out when the clock struck midnight, at that time there wasn't really motion, there wasn't really gesture in any practical application at all. Our interface mission is to develop and promote technology based on extensive IP that supports simplified living through intuitive, natural, motion-based controls. And our IP is globally. We're in all the major markets of the world. We've got primary patents, and then we've got continuations, methods, claims, and other patents also. So before we start, I want you to go through the visualization. All of you in Austin, Texas will really appreciate this. It gets hot here in the summertime, and a lot of us dream and start wanting to go to Colorado. One of the favorite things I like to do is go backpacking. So I'd like you to visualize right now that you're in a high alpine meadow, beautiful blue skies, 10,000 feet. You've been there for a couple days, so you're not gasping for air. You're standing and you're seeing the wind blow, and as the wind blows, the treetops sway. The smell of the pines comes in. You hear the stream flowing into a glacier lake off to your side. You got your fly rod in hand. This is really natural. This is living. The trailheads come in the front. You have to make a decision as to what you're going to do. Okay, I want you to remember that scene, because we're going to go through some definitions here, and hopefully the way that you look at motion versus gestures versus a universal motion interface versus a natural user interface will be changed. If that's the case, then I've done my job. First of all, intuitive. Intuitive is spontaneously derived from or prompted by a natural tendency. Well, what does natural mean? Natural, in accordance with nature. Existing or produced by nature. Not artificial or imitation. There goes computers. Existing in or in conformity with nature. There comes computers back. Functioning or occurring in a normal way. What is the definition of a gesture? Well, a gesture is a motion that starts with a predefined pose or posture. That's the starting point. A predefined motion has to occur until a predefined stopping point is reached. Then a lookup table is referred to, and then a command is sent according to the lookup table value. Well, this is the same thing as keystrokes, mouse clicks, and voice. These are all virtual buttons. In the mechanical world, we hit a mechanical button, It fires something to happen. In the switch, we flip it, something happens. In the virtual world, when we do a gesture, it's the same thing. Once we do the motion, it's the same thing as if I flipped a switch. When I give a voice command, after the voice command occurs, it flips the switch. When I click a mouse, after I click the mouse, it occurs. So these all are the same kind of interface, just in different forms. So what is a natural user interface? Well, a natural user interface is a human-computer interface that models aspects of direct interactions between people and their natural environment. And there's a lot of people talking about natural user interface. So far, it's mainly, and we'll have a quote that's coming up later, but it's consists of voice, gestures, and keystrokes, or buttons, touch, is how it's described. Well, that's really leaving out the most natural part of a natural user interface. So let's picture this. You remember that picture I told you ahead of time? When the wind blows, if we converted all that scene into a bunch of gestures or voice commands or keystrokes, it would look like this. The wind blows and stops. The tree moves. The wind blows and stops. The scent comes wafting across our nose. It stops. The stream doesn't make noise as it flows. It moves a noise. It moves a noise. And when I use that fly rod, when I finish all my motions, then the line starts to whip back, come forward, go forward, and lay that fly over. That's what it's like with almost every interaction that we see today. Where is the natural part? Well, let's think about how we learn. When we learn as a baby, the very first thing we learn is not a gesture. First thing we learn is how to deal with natural motion. It's usually something like a bottle or a clinging motion. We learn to fight gravity. Gravity is the thing that alters our lives permanently and in all of our environment. And if your interface doesn't include gravity as a natural user experience, it's not natural. So the first thing we do is we start beginning to wave our hands, and we start realizing, and then our eyes begin to see the moving world around us, and then information begins to come in packets. So as we see a smile or a gesture, or as we see a word, we begin to realize, that means something. So this packet of information is delivered to us through the form of a gesture, of all three kinds of those gestures. Then we begin to learn we can communicate that way, and we cry, and boy, what a cry does. All of a sudden, mama arrives, daddy arrives, I get fed, I get wiped, I get taken care of, I get held. Gestures mean a huge amount of things. In the meantime, we're beginning to learn this pattern of how to deal with our natural environment at a lower level, but that we constantly have to deal with. So as we get older, let's say that we take this young man here. This is an example of a wheelbarrow. When we push a wheelbarrow, as we move, that wheelbarrow moves. As we push faster, it goes faster. As we slow down, it slows down. As we lift up the wheelbarrow, the dirt begins to go out. The more I lift it, the faster it goes, and it's one-to-one real-time motion. Well, that is really the most natural environment. When we work with tools, we don't consider tools to be of a higher intelligence. They move as we move, a hammer goes as we go. We don't have to have some complicated language. In fact, we need to treat them like a tool. The things around us in the environment, we don't need to treat them like artificial intelligence. These are tools, so we should treat a tool in the most natural way. So how do we begin to quantify what this entire environment is that we subconsciously deal with, that's a part of our everyday actions and is the most natural part? Well, Newton had this same problem. In 1684, Edmund Halley was a good friend of Newton, and Isaac Newton, and he asked Isaac Newton to mathematically prove that the planets would move in an ellipse by the inverse square law of attraction. At this time, I think Newton was 41. At 23, Newton had already proved that the inverse law of attraction in an inverse law pattern would cause an ellipse. But then he had to put it to bodies, and these bodies were made up of things and of different amounts and different sizes. And here there's this attractive force. How does he describe this? He had great difficulties explaining this force because there was no vocabulary associated with this word. So he invented it. He defined quantity of matter as mass, and quantity of motion as the product of velocity and mass. And he stated in his 8-page document that came out, It is now established that this force is gravity, and therefore we shall call it gravity from now on. It's one of the most beautiful, subtle inventions ever done, because he took an entire concept of which we have no idea how it works, we have no idea how much is involved with it, and he put it all in one word. Now I don't have to understand it, but I can begin to work with it. I can define it, I can see the force that it affects on other forces. I don't have to understand it, but I can use it. I can make it practical. In the same way, even though it wasn't understood, by being encapsulated and quantified, and he could begin to work with it. In the same way, this entire intuitive part of us, the part that goes from thought to electrical stimulation, to physical movement, to control of another object, to an end reaction that's everything around us at a quantum basic level. The word quantum means how much. That's what it comes from. So if I take how much and I put it all together and we call this natural living environment a word, we call it quantum. The quantity of thoughts, energy, sentience, movement, forces, inputs, and outputs that occur between a participant and their environment in a real-time, one-to-one, natural manner. So let that soak in a little bit about the word quantum, because we're going to start using that word to be able to identify other things. So what is a quantum interface? Well, it's how we interface with quantum. Quantum interface is a control interface between users and objects where natural intuitive motions of the user correspondingly control the selection and/or attributes of devices or objects in a real-time or one-to-one manner. This may include gestures where gestures provide a change in direction, and such change results in a selection and/or attribute control. It is the essential part of a universal motion interface. Universal motion interface would encapsulate all kinds of motion. This is the significant part of it. So when we look at what a gesture provides, whether it's going to be by audible commands, buttons and clicks, or what we define as gestures, which is the start, stopping point, pose, command, then something goes up. And we compare that with real-time, a quantum interface or a universal motion interface, we see that the difference is we get dynamic feedback, real-time, one-to-one, instead of latency. Not only is the causative effect not latency, it doesn't have latency, but also the feedback has no latency. It's a truly natural input, and we do get one-to-one. The audible, buttons that click and gestures also share the same problem. They have to be learned. They're local, they're cultural. I mean, down here, does everybody know what this means? Well, to A&M, this means something totally different. A&M are Aggies, by the way.
We go.
Woo! Okay. What does this mean? Red Raiders. But to somebody else, it may mean a point. To somebody else, it may mean give me all your money. So the gestures that are there are far different than the natural motions. The natural motion is, as I move up, I expect something to rise up. I expect a value to go up. As it goes down, it goes down. Simple. Left to right, I expect to be able to move at the trailhead, the direction I turn. I'm selecting where I'm going by where I'm moving. That's all a natural tendency that we want to use in the skills of our interfaces. These ideas must be incorporated for a truly natural interface. Oops. So our IP covers the use of this quantum interface. In fact, that definition is basically what our IP says. And this is part, and the bigger part of the UMI. We add value to products by providing the most natural interface. The quantum interface, universal motion interface, UMI, makes products more intuitive to use. This makes them more desirable, resulting in increased demand. So if you want your products to have an increased demand, you've got to make them more desirable. How are you going to make them more desirable? That's what this entire convention is about. It's about making them more natural. Natural is not just gestures. You cannot include that. That's actually difficult. Let's go back to the base level of the way we really work as human beings with the things around us. So let's give some example, intuitive actions with our surroundings. There's some simple solutions that, and we're going to go from one axis up to 2, 3, and then with other motions. The first one is, one of the companies we're working with is Wells Gardner, and this is a hospital bed controller. USB connection, plugs into a tablet or a computer. When we're done, we'll have this set up and you can use it. And the way this works is, this only uses one direction. As I move, I select which part of the bed goes up and down. Then I move it, I wait, there's a hold, and then I move up and down based upon if I move side to side. That's not as intuitive as going, pick the section I want and then move up and down and move the bed. That one's really easy. Or how about I choose the whole thing and move it up or down? That's really intuitive. This is one axis. 2 axis is when I start moving up and down. But it really becomes powerful when we start working in any environment, whether it's a camera environment or whether it's going to be a touch sensitive or a touchless environment and a holographic environment. When we take the 3 planes of motion plus theta plus custom motions, user defined motions, and we put it all on our phone and we just point to that light and we raise or lower. That means I've selected and I've raised or lowered. That's the use of natural motion, is not a gesture. That's what our IP is. Also, when you include wireless, Zigbee, Z-Wave, and the other protocols, now you've got a real way of interacting with the environment around us as well in a home environment. This is the example right here. In other words, I can pick and choose which device I want and move up or down. Now, I can also go back and use touch because I want to be able to not move and I want to be able to just pick it where I am. That's another interface. These also are going to have to communicate with each other because it wants to choose which is the easiest way for me to interface with my environment. Now we're beginning to describe something that's truly convenient and it'll be even more accepted. This is an example, another product that we're working with Wells Gardner. This is a video dispensing machine. It's a vending machine, and what it does is it uses our technology to select what you see on the screen, to open up that product, to enter in your zip code by moving and just selecting what the numbers are. Then you physically still go through a credit card. But this is an example of something that can give you what others have already said. It gives you the advantage of hygiene. Also in Arizona where it's hot, screens get 140 degrees, you don't have to touch it. When it's cold, you can wear your gloves, don't have to touch it. Our technology is agnostic, sensor agnostic. We really don't care. So whatever the best sensor is for the application, that should be used. And multiple sensors gives a better resolution. So how do we interact with our mobile devices? Well, right now there's a pretty big debate on some unlocking IP. Well, let me give an example of how simple it could really be. And this is our IP. First thing we want to do is we want to unlock it. Well, let's look at a mechanical tumbler. If we take a mechanical tumbler, it's really a 3-dimensional controller in a mechanical form. I turn one way, it hits one set, it takes one tumbler and sets it. I turn the other, goes one level down, hits the next one. I go the third way, it turns the third one. When they all line up, the lock opens up. Virtually, we can do the same thing. As I move, I pick where my tumbler is that I choose. As I move, I pick my second tumbler. As I move, I pick my third. I just drilled down in 3 dimensions on a single plane, and I got the same effect virtually of what that mechanical lock does. By just simple motion, not gestures, I've done selection and attribute control. So let's make it even easier. Let's say that we have a screen and it's a matrix, a honeycomb pattern. When I move, as I just change direction, it changes the attribute of that node. No predefined gestures or directions are required. Extensive attribute logic can add many more levels of security with unlimited graphical options. In other words, when I get to that one, if I wanted to spin, I could change the shape. I could change the color. Whatever I wanted to do, just by a change in direction, I can change the attribute of, and then I move on to the next one. When I change my direction, When I change my direction like the wheelbarrow, I change the attribute. So, voice, gesture, touch does not necessarily a natural user interface make. So, famous quote by Bill Buxton. But with a quantum interface, it does. That's Luke Skywalker. So, how important is quantum? How important is quantum interface? And how important is it in the universal motion interface and the subsequent natural user interface, which is the goal that we're all trying to get? Well, a year ago at CES, or 2010 at CES, when I went there, I didn't hear a word about motion. All I heard was gestures. And when anybody said motion and gestures, they meant the same thing. The same was true this year in January. And today we have a conference where it's split because the importance of it exists. So that's how important it is. And that's where I hope that you all really tackle the intuitiveness and whatever it takes to make these natural environments. We also really enjoy working with people with disabilities. It's one of the causes that are near and dear to our heart. And a good example that is, and I use the same example because it was so moving to me. We took a controller that was based for people with full dexterity. We have a project that uses our technology in East Hampton. It's called the BioSleep House. It's a light switch, series of light switches in the houses and controls ceiling fans, light switches, internal and external. And it's just based upon motion. I took that same controller out and I gave it to a man named Gene Rogers. And Gene Rogers is a quadriplegic. He went to Lake Travis. A lot of you here know where that is. He dove off the cliffs and hit a rock down below. And he was, I think, 21 when that happened. Well, he has the mobility to move about this much. That's about it. His head moves about this much. So I went to his house and I said, how do you turn on your microwave? How do you turn on your lights? How do you turn on your TV? Because what's really important to people that have disabilities, especially quadriplegics, and we work with the University of Texas and we work with other nonprofits, the first thing they want is they say, I want a TV controller and I want a telephone. That's what they want. Their life, social life consists of that. Well, so I asked him, how do you interface? So he used his chair with this joystick that he could barely work. He rolled up to his desk and he pulls out a straw and he starts pecking at toggle switches. That's the technology that still is used today, which is really sad. So I put this controller in his lap, and with the little motions he could do, he sat upright, he looked us in the eye, he started to cry, and he controlled 4 things and talked to us at the same time and said, you don't realize how much this changes our lives. So that's the power of how simple things can affect people's lives. And if it helps them, all of us have disabilities. They're all in different forms. And whatever helps anybody with disabilities in one form is going to help the rest of us. Whatever helps my disabilities is going to help the rest of us. So that is a good field that I would... we saw yesterday, I don't remember who it was, but the whole swipe technology was based on helping people with disabilities. That's a great example of how that works. So quantum is the natural, intuitive part of life around us. So when you think about, when you look around, I'd encourage you to try to look around and realize there's that hidden natural environment that exists that we need to bring to light through our interfaces. Thank you very much.